And I'm excited to take you through this journey of understanding that every decision that we make, we think has a rational and practical beginning. But a lot of it is driven by our emotions. And tonight, we're going to take those emotions, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to learn a little bit about yourself and which emotions we should pay attention to. And I'm going to start off with a fun video. We had lots of fun creating this, and the purpose around it was to give you an opportunity to see what emotions are like in real world times when we're making decisions, when we're faced with different challenges. And so I'm going to take you through that now, but I'm going to start off with an apology if the video isn't so awesome, which it should be. Sometimes they're not always so great. Forgive us for the volume or the sound, but I hope you enjoy it because this will be a great way for you to sit back, understand a little bit about how emotions impact everything we do every day.
I am an amazing boss.
I've built a team of smart, highly motivated people, and I think I'm going to lose my job.
What? I'm not going to trust a 25-year-old employee to go to that meeting without me. I have pens older than her.
They want me to make a decision impacting millions of dollars and thousands of jobs. I can't do that.
I can't let Tanya go. She's got 2 kids in private school. They'll have to go to public school. Public school.
I did not throw a book at the new sales guy's head last week. I threw a book at the wall, near his head.
I am not going to happy hour with these people. I'm their boss. They'll probably spread rumors that I'm a drunk.
I'm the perfect combination of Steve Jobs, Einstein, and Gandhi.
I don't deserve that nice office. I'm not earning my paycheck. I totally stink at my job.
Of course I'm at every single meeting at my company.
I figured out an ingenious way to solve almost any problem. Just do nothing.
Dave took me to a baseball game 3 years ago. You can't fire a guy like that.
If you feel unappreciated, get a dog.
I don't have trust issues. I don't. Wait, why do you keep asking?
I am so much smarter than these idiots that work for me.
Now, I hope you enjoyed that. We had lots of fun making that. And as you can see, it's a little exaggerated, but I'm sure you can think about times where you either were witnessing that happening or perhaps it was happening to you. First, I want to thank everybody. There was a little pre-work before you arrived. You all took your head trash index. And later on, I will let you know who some winners are because we did a raffle and we'll be giving away some of my books, but also to give you an idea of where the top scores were for the majority of the people who attend tonight. And that'll give you a sense of how when you think about people in teams or groups or people together, where everyone's emotions are. So that's to come. But what I want to start off with now is to really focus on why is head trash something we should really pay attention to? Because it impacts everything we do from the relations of our decision making. And I know that I probably make thousands of decisions in one day. It could be as simple as what should I make my kids for lunch to, how should I run this meeting that I'm going to have? And so we're all making decisions all day long. And I don't know if you realize it, but a little decision you think you're making probably impacts a lot more people and situations than you think. It may start with ourselves and then reaches out to our families. And if it's in the job environment, it reaches out to our teams and our colleagues. And if it's part of an organization, it impacts the organization. So why not spend a little time to understand what goes into making good decisions and why sometimes some decisions are not so good? And that's what we're going to go through first, because there is a kind of scale that you have to weigh here as you think about decisions and emotions. Now, I'm the first to say that emotions make us who we are. And when I work with individuals in companies, or even when I work alongside some colleagues, I know that the emotions that they have make them unique and make them who they are. So today, we're not talking about removing emotion, because emotion's important. And I think it also makes us unique from each other, is the types of emotions we have. But if we're not paying attention to these emotions, if we're letting our emotions get the best of us or the best of a situation, well, then all of a sudden those emotions are not going to be so good. And so that's the difference from a healthy emotion to an unhealthy emotion. And what I call an unhealthy emotion is head trash. It's those things that come into your head and cause you to make an unclear or a good decision for what's happening. So what does a good decision look like? Well, one, they're not driven by your emotions. Your emotions can be part of your thinking, but they shouldn't drive your decision. You shouldn't also be impulsive. They always say, breathe before you make a decision, or don't react right away. Because in those moments of your just thinking and digesting, you're probably calming down, and those emotions are not as strong so that you can be decisive and be clear. Many times, a good decision is that it was very clear and you knew exactly what you were looking to do and you knew what outcomes that you wanted. So I'd say it's decisive. You had a purpose to what you were trying to get done. And make sure that the decisions you have an outcome, right? How many times do we make decisions and we're not even sure why we made them, nor the outcome that we got was something that we actually feel good about. And so we don't want those things to happen, because typically when those things happen, our emotions were probably stronger than us and we're driving our decision making, which in turn make us reactive and impulsive, which in turn don't achieve any goal that we're trying to achieve, probably created something else that we don't want. And sometimes we actually avoid decisions in a way with our emotions. And avoiding decisions is actually a decision. And it's usually the wrong decision, because you need to address things in front of you. You may not address it right away, but you do have to address it. So get comfortable now as you think about a healthy decision has nice boundaries and requirements. An unhealthy decision also has things now for you to look for. So as you start to gauge for yourself, or even if you think about the index that you took, you started to understand which of the 7 emotions that I'm going to talk about tonight play a part in your thinking. Some may not impact you that much, but the ones that scored the higher for you two, I would probably be the ones that we're going to pay attention to as we navigate this journey together tonight, as I explain to you what those decisions are going to look like if made with head trash. And just plain definition, so that you can get very comfortable with it, is that emotional patterns that hinder you from making a good choice and being effective. Now, I don't know about you, but I have done multiple times bad decision making because of my emotions. I have 2 teenagers, so I probably do that 3 or 4 times a day alone. So it's us personally as well as professionally. Think about it that way, because we are who we take everywhere that we go. So those emotions that may impact us at home are probably impacting us at the office, impacting with our friends, and impacting us with our families. And I want us to get comfortable that we don't want the emotions to go away, but we do want to manage them instead of them managing us. And that's not going to be so hard, because I'm going to give you some examples and things to do for each of the 7 that I go through, so that when you leave tonight, you've got a plan. And I always believe that if people have a plan, they typically want to follow it because they know the outcome is going to be positive. So I'm going to start with control. And think about control from a healthy standpoint. It's having boundaries, it's having protocols, it's having some sort of rules. Control is important. There are things in life that you need to have control for. But when it becomes decision disrupting, where it forces you to not make the decision effectively because it's about power that you need to have, or the authority to which you have to reign over every little thing that's going on. Now, you may not have it yourself, but think about your life and the folks in your life, where those that are always very controlling of an environment. And what does that look like? Well, one, they hardly ever empower others to do stuff. They may give control, but then they take it back. They may offer you something to run on your own, but then all of a sudden they follow up every second to see how it's going. They may even not want you to constantly give them updates. Or that's the type that actually will parcel out some information to some people, a little information to another group, and then everybody knows a little bit of something, but not enough of all of it, because that means the person who knows everything is in control. And so that's going to stifle others. It's going to not want people to actually be creative. It's not going to want people to actually do anymore. It's a very one-way conversation. And so when you have that controlling environment, people don't stick around because it forces people to feel very compliant to the rules and can't have the ability to be opportunist or try new things. And to an individual, it's stifling. To a business, it's actually crushing. Because if you cannot have innovation and you don't allow people to be empowered, I've never met a business that's run by one person. You need to have others do stuff. And as I think about all the clients that I work with, I always like to share a story because I do think real world examples hit home for many. And so my funny cartoon gives a perfect example of how you're giving someone a project and let them handle it. And then the next day you sit in and you want to know every little thing that's going on. And so that happens often. And when you find that that's how you're treating others, I think about it from a parental standpoint. Sometimes parents want to do everything they could to ensure that their children have everything perfect. And then when they go off on their own, they're not quite sure how to do much because they've been so stifled on how to do things or have people do things for them that they don't know how to do for themselves. Or in an organization, when you have a group or a team that you're working with and you control everything that they do, well, they'll never feel comfortable to venture out and learn through mistakes or try on their own. And those are things that will make it very uncomfortable for someone to want to be around, because who likes to be controlled 24/7? It's not fun. And you don't use your brain power. And so control, when it's healthy, it gives you boundaries. It allows you to proceed with some sort of structure. And many times it keeps us safe. But when it crosses the line, which is what I call the head trash line, all of a sudden it doesn't create innovation. It doesn't allow people to feel empowered. And it doesn't make it a place that people enjoy being. And so think about that for yourself when you think of control. Are you controlling, or are you having others make it more about control? Tips for that. Well, first of all, many times the issue with control is people don't feel comfortable delegating. Well, I like to think of delegating in a Tupperware China scenario. If you're going to delegate to others, and think about it from a Tupperware standpoint, Tupperware doesn't falter. If it falls, it can't get destroyed that easily, though sometimes you miss the covers when you put them away, but somehow you always have the bottoms, right? So Tupperware in itself always sticks around and always still usable. China, on the other hand, when it falls or drops, it shatters and you can't pick it up. And so the best thing to do is, if you're going to start delegating and you're not quite comfortable letting control out to others, give the stuff that's Tupperware. Give the stuff that if it falls and breaks, someone learns from it, but you can still salvage it. I wouldn't start off with the China, the things that if it does fail, it could create lots of challenges. And remember, perfect is the enemy of not getting things done. And so don't try to think that everything you do is perfect and people have to do it just like you. Or don't set assumptions that it has to be done perfectly, and perfectly means your way, because no two things are ever done exactly the same, but it doesn't mean we don't both get to the place we have to go. So as you think about control, see whether or not that's something that you feel stifled by, or perhaps you're forcing the stifling yourself. We all have a little bit of these, but some of them don't control us as much as others. Now, insecurity, as you saw from the video, it is really the person giving themselves unhappy thoughts, or these thoughts of incapability, or I'm not good enough. So it's decision disrupting because it's your own voice saying these things to you. And that's kind of difficult to fight off when it's your own voice, because you have to have another voice to kind of fight it off. So how are we going to manage that if you're the negative voice in your head and no one else thinks that? That's the funny thing. In most cases, those that have the insecurity are usually very good at what they do, and others usually find them extremely valuable. It's themselves. When they look in the mirror, they have these thoughts inside their head. Now, a healthy insecurity is making sure that you don't not kind of question yourself and keep yourself in check and know that there's always room for improvement. But when it's degrading you because you're saying stuff all the time that you almost feel like you're an imposter somewhere and you shouldn't be there, or you have trouble taking a piece of feedback, even if it is good feedback. Ever engage with someone and you tell them what a great job they did, and the first words out of their mouth is everything they thought that went wrong and how they could have done better? That's a perfect example of someone having insecurity, because they can't accept a piece of feedback, even positive, and say thank you. And think about that. Sometimes it is hard when someone compliments you to say thank you. You feel like you need to say something. Well, don't say something negative. Just say thank you and smile, right? And what happens when you have this is it often makes you make bad decisions about you. You don't take risks because you don't believe in yourself. You try to get everyone else to make decisions with you because you're afraid you can't. And you prevent people from around you growing because you're fearful that they're going to be smarter than you. And so an example of this would be is when someone actually believes less in themselves than others believe in them. And I have one of my clients, I'll never forget this. She had gotten a promotion and was initially excited until she realized how much more of it involved in her time in different groups. And she called me and said, I have to get a new job. I said, why? She goes, I just got a promotion. I can't do this. They're going to know I can't take a double team on. And, after trying to rationalize with her that, gee, that's silly. Why would they give you a promotion if they didn't think you can do it? She actually went out, looked for a job, and took a new job. And it wasn't until several months later when she sent me a note and said, I really did well at that other job. I get a ton of emails from people asking me questions and telling me how great it was when I was here. I guess I knew what I was doing. I said, yeah, I guess you did. So be very careful at times with something like insecurity. If you are constantly talking to yourself in a way that makes you down or not feeling good enough, well, we're going to have to do something that stops you from that. And one of them is I want you to write down on a piece of paper, because when people write things down, I know it becomes real. Write down for yourself all the things that you are good at and all the things that you enjoy doing. And you may come up with a pretty good feeling about yourself. The second is stop comparing. No one ever knows what the other's life is like, and no one ever really knows the true story. But today, a lot of folks find that the comparing is what gives anxiety around the insecurities. Compare yourself to you, set goals for yourself, and achieve those goals. Don't worry what Bob and Mary are doing. Stick to what your goals are, because in the end, you'll be happier. And take praise. Smile and be generous with it, but also in accepting it. Because as you get comfortable accepting people saying nice things about you, you'll start to believe them. And really, the whole mechanism around insecurity is to make sure the things you're saying to you are positive and are good, because they typically are. It's only you that's saying that they're not. And so to work on that is a constant thing of repeating it and saying it to yourself. Now, arrogance, well, that's the opposite side of insecurity. And we all know those folks when they come walking in the room, or they enter a meeting, or even join you for dinner. Because those that have an arrogance, they have this superiority in which they think everything they say is the only thing people should hear. Now, arrogance has a healthy side, right? And Steve Jobs, he had written in his book that arrogance is what got him his success. And it probably was a lot of his beliefs that he knew what he was doing and he knew he can change the world. What happened was when it was only his voice that he heard and only that mattered, well, that's when arrogance crosses the line and becomes a head trash, because you won't want to have just one voice that you hear of your own. You really don't want to think you're the only one that knows everything, because you're not. And until that person starts to realize that they should listen more and understand the value of others, and they think they're the only voice in the room, well, it's actually pretty lonely. And so those folks who have the arrogance from confidence crossing the line to become an arrogance of head trash, well, they're the ones that talk always over and never listen, right? They're talking more than they're listening, and they're never admitting they're wrong, right? They're always right. Somehow they work out that they're always right. And they have such confidence when they're saying it, you start to believe it. But that doesn't mean you enjoy or want to be around someone that always thinks they're the smartest person in the room. And I know we've all run into some of those. And quite honestly, it destroys culture. It destroys the atmosphere. It's not enjoyable. And they may be right even about a lot of the things they're saying. But if someone has to force it on you because it's them who's saying it, you usually don't listen, which means it doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. And what does this result in? Well, first of all, most times they're lonely because people don't want to be around them. They don't get invited to things. They're not called into meetings because they usually take them over. And they make A players into B players because after a while, the A player just gives up. It's not worth the battle. They demotivate because it's so frustrating to have only one voice in the room when you're trying to get a word in edgewise. And it's hard to have people always tell you how smart they are, because that means they don't believe anyone else is. So arrogance from a healthy standpoint is being confident and sure in what you can do. It turns over when you're the only voice you let speak and the only one you want to listen to. And that doesn't amount to having much enjoyment. And think about it, if from a personal standpoint, when there's those folks that you can't invite out with the other folks, you ever have groups of friends where there's always that one friend you can only have particular people around them because they don't get along with everybody? Or in the work setting, they're the ones that take over a meeting, even if they're not the lead. They start talking, and before you know it, they're taking over the meeting and telling everybody what they should do. It's not even their meeting. And so these are the things that you want to start to pay attention to if you're doing it yourself, or if you're seeing others do it and you want to kind of gently let them know that there's other voices in the room and sharing that feedback with them. Arrogance, best way to do it is try to be a teacher and a mentor instead of a teller, right? I mean, think about it. Just try to see yourself, if you're so smart, and typically those who are arrogant actually are pretty darn smart and know their stuff. However, you stop listening to them when they dictate. So as that is something that they're doing, try to think of it as a teaching moment instead of a telling moment, and invite others and their input. Even if you know that you're the right answer, a lot of times folks just want to be part of a dialogue, have a discussion, and want to be part of the decision. Many times they don't want to make the decision, but they want to be part of the decision. And those who have the arrogant head trash, give credit where credit's due. It doesn't take away from you. It actually makes you bigger, and it has you looked at with much more credibility when you share the credit and you give it to others, which for someone who's battling with arrogance from the confident to the head trash, not so easy to do. But when you start doing these, you're going to start to see that people will listen to you, which is the main goal that you actually wanted, was for it to be heard. Well, actually, they'll start to listen if you're not telling them, but teaching them. Now, this one is my favorite because it's my number one head trash, though I don't always look like this person, but many times on the weekends I can. Anger is the immediate reaction you have to something when it's displeasing you. And that means there's no composure and you just kind of let it all out. And it's not also just loud in tone, like a scream. It could be just subtle body language, like your hands being crossed, or your legs are crossed and you're shaking your knee, or you've got your fists on your shoulders like this, which you probably can't see me because I'm sitting, but you get the point. It's your body language of I'm not happy. And it's not giving any room for them to even assume anything because you're telling them right out of the gate, I'm not happy. Now, I don't want you to think you're not allowed to be unhappy and upset or disappointed with someone, but how you choose to share that with them is what I don't want your anger, which is I'm not happy with you, to, oh my God, what is wrong with you, right? It's a tone, it is the body language, and it's the way in which you speak to them. Anger is one of those things that most of us could battle with, but the ones who actually have it as a head trash don't even realize they're doing it. And it's interesting because you would think that responding quickly lets people know where you are, but many times if you gave yourself a count to 10 and pause before you respond, or didn't send that email right after you got the email you didn't like and you quickly started to send it, you're going to actually send a better message. you're actually going to say something better. It's that pause, think, digest before you react. And for me personally, I do kind of struggle with that because I like to keep things moving. I like to get things going. And so if I get something I don't like, I'm ready to respond. I've had to train myself to say, okay, I'm not going to answer that yet. I'm not going to respond right away. Let me think a minute before I say something, which is my mechanisms that I use. One of them is called the invisible zipper, which I literally have to sometimes do physically so that I don't open my mouth and say something that I'll regret. I go zoop, because I know that I need to think and breathe for a minute. That's one of my tips. And the thing that it results in, if you don't do those things, well, one, the climate of the office becomes one of fear. Everybody's afraid of what the day is going to be like. And that forces everyone to be kind of CYA to make sure that no one's going to get in trouble. So you're not having everyone at their best. And if it's more of a personal setting, people are not around you because they like you. They're around because they're afraid if they're not around you, something could happen. Nobody wants to be managed or behave with a sense of fear. And I don't think we intend to. That's not my intent. But, I purposely have to control myself. So my funny story is about me because it revolves where I reacted. Not that I got angry out loud, but I was very quick to respond when we rented a car and it wasn't the right car. And as my family and I are walking over to the car, my husband says, I don't think that's the right car. I go, oh, come on. I booked it so long ago. I zoom over. I start telling the person it's the wrong car, and I immediately want to change, and I'd like to get something right away. And the person obviously was very calm, very nice, says, we don't have something right away. I said, well, I expect something tomorrow. And they said, tomorrow you'll have something. And we get into the car. My husband says, I don't think this car is so bad. It actually has all the things we want. It fits everything we have. And as we're driving to where we're going, I said, you're right. It really isn't so bad. Maybe we should keep this car. And he says, well, when they call tomorrow with the brand new one that you've just demanded, you're getting the phone. And so, of course, they called first thing in the morning, and I had to take the call and apologize for my immediate response when I should have thought it through, maybe test drove it, see if it would work out, and not have to deal with it. And so, look, all of us live through these emotions. I work daily on my anger management because I love things to happen. So it's not from a bad intent. It's from I like movement and things to happen. But you know what? Sometimes things don't always happen as fast or the way I want. It's learning to adjust. And I use my zipper when I'm supposed to, except for that day I did not, because we're human and we will always remember that we keep trying every day. So tips, breathe and sort it out. And if it's something that you're about to write, I call it the poison pen, don't hit send or send it to yourself and then read it and see if you really want to send it after that. Because the odds are you will change a few words. You'll add something in the beginning and you'll follow it up with the end that's a lot nicer than the way you ended it your first time. And from a scale of 1 to 10, and I probably say this often to my clients, are you sure that's where you want to react to that one on a scale of 1 to 10? Is it that bad? And when you start to rationalize on whether or not it is that bad, usually all things come down in the scale and they're not as bad. Then we have guilt. And now guilt has a double-edged sword, as they say. Guilt can be something you feel when you feel guilty, and guilt could also be something you push onto someone else as if you guilt them into doing something. And so guilt is one of those things that you think about from the standpoint of a healthy guilt. Well, I'm an Italian Catholic who guilt was how we grew up, and my mother would guilt us into all the things we were supposed to do because she could. But we did good things because of that. We learned to write thank you notes all the time. We learned to always be polite by calling someone by Mr. or Mrs. and doctor. And so you learn when your parents guilt you to do the right thing, they're not so bad. But when guilt crosses the line and you make bad decisions out of guilt, or you guilt others into doing stuff, well, no, that's not the healthy guilt we're talking about. And so guilt-ridden is when we are making decisions that we feel so terrible about, like in our video, that person who didn't want to have the person let go who took him to a baseball game. right? You make decisions that feel better to you, that you don't have to do the bad thing. But is that really better for the other person if it's not working, right? And guilt wielding is when you exploit on someone all the things that they owe you or should be doing for you because of what you've done for them. And so as you think about guilt, that's the two ways in which it can happen, and it's also the two ways in which you can be doing that. And remember, there's a healthy guilt, but when it crosses the line and you're making decisions, like for example, in a business, you notice when they have the musical org chart where there's a person, that role keeps changing and it kind of grows with bigger title, but less responsibility and no deliverables. Well, that's probably part of a guilt decision being made. Or when you see that people are just becoming content and letting things go and being happy with okay. I mean, those are the things what happen when you have folks that are utilizing guilt to make some of their decisions. And I remember clearly, and this is a funny cartoon that kind of talks about giving a difficult message about performance and then giving raises to everybody because they felt so guilty about giving the feedback. And it's true. I mean, when you have to make tough decisions, and I worked with a family-run business where I had two brothers working together, and one of the brothers had to let the other brother go. I mean, it took 18 years to let the brother go. So I think guilt was there for a while, but it wasn't until the brother who was let go's son came into the business and it was impacting the nephew in a negative way because things weren't working out, that the right decision had to get made. And so you just think about how, you try to do things that feel right because you think that's right. And sometimes things that feel right don't make it right. So when you're looking at weighing whether or not you're making decisions out of guilt, one is think about the accountability of doing the right thing. Don't put blame on it, right? Think about the accountability of doing the right thing. The right thing to give someone feedback that they may not like is to help them to get better. It's the wrong thing not to give it, right? And request and act on things that are not personal. Try not to make things personal. Like when you need something from someone, it's because you need that thing, not because they owe you it to do it, right? And so be mindful that you don't want to carry baggage from place to place either, because that doesn't help you feel better about doing the right thing. Because again, the right thing may not always feel right when you're doing it. Weigh the accountability on what is the thing that's best for everyone, or best for the business, or best for that other person first. That's doing the right thing. And it may never make you feel good to say those things, but if you didn't say them, you should actually feel worse. Paranoia. We all have a little bit of this, but some of us have to worry if it's really impacting us, right? Because what paranoia is, and it's very different than insecurity. Some people think it's very similar, and it's actually the complete opposite. Insecurity is your own voices in your head saying things that are negative. Paranoia is you thinking that everybody else is saying stuff about you, and it's irrational. It's very suspicious, and the biggest loss is that you have no trust. And so what does it look like? Well, you do avoid being around others, and you stay by yourself because then you're safe. And you do nothing with anyone else because that only gives them in your mind ammunition that they can get to you. So paranoia actually lets you kind of work alone or be alone because of all the things that you're afraid someone is saying about you. It's also stifling you to ever build a relationship. And you know how important relationships are. So if you never want to form a relationship with anyone, because you feel they're going to hurt you or they're out to get you and you have these negative feelings about it, then you'll probably never trust anyone. And you've got to build trust in someone. You've got to start somewhere. And when you have these things, it creates a very negative environment. The environment becomes negative because if you believe that all those people or all those things they're saying are about you, you start to act as if that's really happening, which could make you negative, which forces yourself to have a negative environment. And someone who's paranoid tends to not hire strong people because they don't want people around them that could upstage them because they're too worried that it may actually be something they do better than them, even if that's not the intent. And, you know, sometimes it actually makes you even think that if someone's doing something nice for you, there's an ulterior motive always. Like this little phone call where the person said, I just got a promotion and a raise, but what do you mean by that? True story is I was working with a company, and one of their lead salespeople sends me a note and says, hey, read this email that I just got from Bob. Bob was the senior manager. So I read it and it says, you've been doing such a fabulous job. I just want to let you know, and we're going to be giving you some of our more strategic accounts because of the great work you've done. So I called her and said, wow, sounds like you're really doing a great job. She was like, are you kidding? I think he's trying to fire me. And I said, why do you think that? She says, well, he's setting me up with those clients. He knows I am not. There's definitely something going on here. I'm getting set up. And I remember saying, Mary, I'm thinking you're reading into this. I don't think you're set up for anything other than I think they think you're doing a good job. And so it actually plays on your mind a little bit to the point where you don't think clearly and you honestly think everyone spends their time to get ways to do bad by you. And that's horrible. I mean, that is not a good way to feel. And so we need to think about how to get away from that. One, stop assuming. If you think someone's trying to set you up or someone is not doing something good by you, why don't you go into question mode and get clarity? You don't have to attack. Go into question mode. Like, gee, why would you say that? Or what were you thinking when you said that note? I mean, at some point, you'll be able to uncover then what's happening. And try to focus on building one trusted relationship. I'm not going to say go out there and put yourself out there and get all these folks to believe in you and you believe in them, because that's not practical. Find one who you start to build trust with. It is going to be like a domino effect. Once you can see that you can build a relationship of trust with someone, so will you be able to build it with another. And keep a log of the things that trigger you. And accept them, that when you see someone does a certain thing, that's why it bothers you. Maybe start to kind of write out what those triggers are so you can unpack it and try to get rid of those things that bother you, because now you know what you're looking for. See, many times we don't know what we're looking for. Same thing why I wanted to highlight all these different areas of these emotions, because now you can look at them differently as you're managing yourself. And our last one is fear. And probably the most common, because we're all a little fearful about something, and that's okay because you don't want to be reckless, but you also don't want to stop. Fear is something that you should consider more as a caution. Be cautious. Just like if you saw a red stop sign or a cautious flashing light. The cautious flashing light tells you proceed just with caution. The stop sign says don't move. And many times the fear emotion goes from the cautious, let's go with caution and proceed lightly, to don't move at all. And when you become immobile and you don't give yourself an opportunity to try, you get resentful of the what if, I shoulda, coulda, and all of a sudden you start to find yourself not in a happy place. The second is you build workarounds. Whenever there's something that has to get done, instead of actually addressing it, you build the workaround. And so you've got to be mindful that if you're building all these workarounds or excuses, why are you doing it? You're probably stopping yourself from doing something. And change is not easy, but change is evolution. And so lots of times people are afraid of change, so they don't accept it. And this is where you need to be mindful. Is it cautious that we should be? Or are we actually becoming fearful and do nothing? And when you do make that cross the line from cautious to fear of a head trash, people start to disrespect your ability to make decisions. And so if you're in a leadership role, or if you're in a managerial role, or even in your own personal life, if you can't make decisions, people eventually stop asking you to. And they don't have trust in you that you can. And if it's settling for the status quo because that's safe, and you don't try, well, then you're probably going to be in this constant cycle of mediocre. And no one likes to be there. They choose to be there. And when you're there, you're not happy you're there, because then you find yourself resenting, why didn't I? Well, why didn't I? Because you're not giving yourself an opportunity to try. And the biggest thing that most who have fear as a head trash suffer from is they think they have to know everything. They think they have to have the answers for everything. And that is not the case, because that's where you're wrong. You just need to be able to manage yourself so that you can make it into baby steps. You know, step by step. The world wasn't created in one day. Well, neither are some of these big changes we're going to do. So build a roadmap for yourself with some steps. Otherwise, you're going to find that the answer you give for everything is never or no. And no one wants to be around someone who's never and no. And as a leadership thinking process, fear will stifle an organization from change. And as an individual, fear will have you in a place where you're stagnant and you don't proceed forward and even growing. And at the end of the day, in both areas, that's not going to be where you'd like to be. So though fear is something we have because if it's healthy, it protects you from being cautious, we don't want it to stop you from moving, because no movement means you don't go anywhere. And some tips for that is when you think about the big decisions you have to make, break them down into sizable things you can manage. No one says you have to know it all from start to finish, but step one, get step one started. And decide for yourself what's considered safe enough, right? Get to that safe place where if we do at least this, I know I can go there. And if I get to there, then I can go to the next thing. That'll allow you to overcome some of these big decisions that you have to make. And these decisions could be things from going from renting to buying a home. That's a bigger commitment. From pivoting a decision for the business of one type of way to do something to another. Rolling out a new product, if it's something new, chancing a new feature on something that you already have. These are the things that you know they're not going to be perfect out of the gate, but if we don't start them and try them, we're never going to get them going. And celebrate small wins. And this is something those with the head trash of fear have trouble with, which is celebrating the small wins. They're too nervous to get up here. Celebrate those wins because they're going to build momentum. And they're going to build confidence so that you can be more decisive. And that's all you need when it comes to fear, is to figure out a way to get yourself comfortable with the unknown by having the ability to know that we're making progress. And really, progress is important. We don't always have to have the answers, but people want to be part of a team that has progress. And so what happens? And why is it important that we actually look at these emotions? And when they become head trash, what they impact. Well, if it's in a business, teams leave, right? Teams deteriorate, they fall apart, good people leave. If it's in your home life, you could be stifling others and have less innovation. And the most important is many of these head trash elements ruin your credibility because you're not making good decisions. You're not being able to think clearly, and you're not presenting yourself in your best form. And so I have one little way to take each one to bring you to a safe zone. So from fear, you break it down and it gets you bravery. From arrogance, if you begin to listen, you become part of the discussion, and that creates modesty. Insecurity, you build your affirmations from the belief in you, which will build your confidence. And control, the minute you start to delegate, think of Tupperware China, you can guide someone somewhere, which means you're empowering them. And anger, a little patience creates understanding, which builds harmony. Guilt produces a way to get to accountability, which doesn't make it feel so badly, which gives you the objectivity to be honest. And paranoia gives you a need for relationships so that you can actually learn and listen and share to tell the truth. Now, of course, it sounds easy on a piece of paper, but if you look at your indexes and you start to think about where your top two are, I hope there are things that you've learned today that help drive you to the ultimate way that's best. And so funny enough, when I had time at the end of today, and I want to thank everyone again for taking the index, we were able to score where we had the number one head trash from, I think it was like 100 people or so took the index, fear. If I tallied up all the answers and I got people's top 2 scores, fear was number 1 and number 2 was paranoia. I don't know what that means because I don't know everyone out in the audience, but as it relates to in group settings, if you were going to be doing this with teams, or if you wanted to have one way to kind of see how a group gets through their decision making, it would be ideal if you knew what some of the pain points might be so that they can help you guide through how you address them. And as Claude had mentioned, I have 2 books that I put out on this. The first was kind of walking people through identifying head trash and the 7 emotions that we talked about. The second was how you identify it in another. Because look, even though we know ourselves, what about if we're working or living with someone who has one of these 7? How do you start to manage that effectively? And we have 2 winners, Caleb and Thurner, Caleb Shiley and Thurner Steve. We did a random, so congratulations to you 2. If you would send Claude your home address or office address or where you'd like us to send the books, you 2 will be getting copies of these books signed by me. So thank you so much for entering your index, and I'm excited to share them with you. And if you'd like to kind of reach me, besides you can also purchase our books if you'd like online, but if you did want to reach me because you had some questions, if we don't get to them this evening, I'm always available. And I love talking to folks about managing their head trash. I have a business that works with young people, young organizations, corporate organizations. I've been doing this, as Claude said, for quite some time. And I enjoy the development of an organization through its people. So I always focus on that first. And if there's anything I can do to help or help you as an individual grow and develop, I'd love to hear from you.